Good evening. We'll call this meeting of Owen Sound City Council to order. We have just been informed by Rogers Television that we will not be live tonight. Also, we will not be taped by Rogers tonight. They've had some technical difficulties. They're unable to do that tonight. However, we are being live web streamed. And that's something that the city does with our council meetings routinely, and that's carrying forward tonight as well. So that's the public service announcement from my chair this evening. Thank you. We are now joining in a moment of silent reflection. So if you'd like to join me in a moment of silent reflection, that would be great. Thank you. If anyone reflected on how hot it is in here, I can appreciate that very much. Technically, we need a declaration to move to the regular council meeting. Any disclosure of, additional items? Additional items? Councillor Body.
Not really an additional item. I'll just note that I've received a phone call from Councillor McManaman. I forgot to tell you before we started. He's on his way. He's late. We'll be here as soon as he can.
He'll be here momentarily, I understand. Thank you for that. Yes. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship. I have an item to bring up, a public meeting, and also an item transit.
Okay. Anyone else for additional items? Ms. Coulter.
Thank you, Worship. I have an additional item. It's a memo from myself to Council that will assist Council in considering the correspondence from Ms. Stewart that was provided to Council on Friday. Hard copies are available this evening.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize for my voice. We do have an additional deputation this evening from Ms. Amber Stewart on behalf of Heritage Grove Centres, Inc., and she did provide a letter, as was mentioned by Ms. Coulter, which was circulated to council staff and the media.
Thank you. Any other members of staff? Council? Seeing none. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one in item 12B7.
Okay. The general nature thereof.
There's a sponsorship arrangement between my employer and the company.
Thank you. That's been noted. Anyone else? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes, please, from our regular council meeting on May 27th.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright. The minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on May 27th, 2013, as printed, be adopted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Resolution moving council and committee of the whole, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded again by Councillor Wright. The City Council now go into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We are now in committee of the whole. We do not have any public meetings that are scheduled for tonight. We do have deputations, though, and I see that our cyclist is here. So I'll invite Mr. Joachim Ostertag, please, to come up to the podium and share with us your Change the Cycle initiative. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, for inviting me, and thanks, City Council. I want to talk about Can you hear me now? I want to talk about a rather exciting project for this summer that I'm going to do. As most of you know, I work for the men's program. We work with men who are abusive to women. I've worked there for 23 years. It's a rather integral part of our community to end violence against women. And in this work, I realized that we have to work on a bigger picture too, to change the issue of male violence against women. So that's one of my passions. My other passion is to bicycle. You might see me sometimes in town. I believe that the bicycle is one of the greatest inventions ever made. So I decided to do this project, to bicycle from Owen Sound to Vancouver this year, starting on June the 20th at noon. And anybody's invited to follow me out of town. We have a police escort to go out of town, direction of Kelso Beach and to Tobermory. So the idea is to travel from here to Vancouver and to talk on the way to people how they have been affected by male violence, particularly male violence against women, and how they would like to see things change and different. And I will collect these stories in a diary as well as on the website that we are still constructing. It's also a fundraiser for the men's program because we are notoriously underfunded by the government. So that's part of it. The tour will lead me, and I'm not sure if I can show this on the map over there. Can I walk there or can I? Okay. So the tour is starting on the 20th at the episode in movie. Oh, so this is Owen Sound, Tobermory, then I go to Sault Ste. Marie. I was going to go to Ontario, to Thunder Bay, but this is a very dangerous road for bicyclists, so I decided to go through the southern route of Lake Superior to Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth, Minnesota is the birthplace of basically all these men's programs that we have in North America and many around the world, working with men who are abusive, and then from Duluth to Richmond, and then to Saskatoon, Edmonton, Jasper, Prince George, and from Prince George, that's Highway 16 here, from Prince George to Prince Rupert, it's called the Highway of Tears, it's about 800 kilometers. It was the idea of our daughter, Sonia, who lives in Prince George and is connected with many communities, to take that route. So there will be all kinds of connections with groups and also First Nations. We know that on this Highway of Tears, it's kind of unclear, but about 50 women are missing or killed, mostly First Nations women. We also know that First Nations women in Canada are suffering about 5 to 7 times more from violence against women, domestic violence. So that's why I think it's an appropriate way to do the tour this way. Then from Prince Rupert, I take the ferry to Vancouver Island, and then I bicycle from Vancouver Island to Vancouver. And in Vancouver, our other daughter, Julia, is organizing a rally on the 10th of August through Vancouver to the Memory Zone in Vancouver. It's really fun here. Just like bicycling to the ferry. Which I've never done before. So that's kind of the major picture. The men's program is part of the Bruce K. Charlton Family Services, which has a foundation, the Bruce K. Charlton Family Foundation, and they are supporting this, and they have done lots of work helping with this. So people can donate money to the foundation. Also, our MP, Larry Miller, is going to call all the MPs on the way from here to the west to announce that I'm coming through, or when I'm coming through their cities, and also the MPPs are being alerted, and so are the news media there. So we'll see what happens. It's a project I've been dreaming of for a long time, and it's some kind of an exploration of what we can do, and we see what happens. Basically, I'm just asking the city to support this project in principle and talk about it. And if you want to come out with your bicycles on the 20th at noon, you're very welcome to come out of town. Do you have any questions?
Thanks very much. Welcome. Where is the departing point on the 20th?
Departing point is at the men's program.
Okay.
It's 925 2nd Avenue East.
Okay.
between TD Bank and Rocky Raccoon. And it goes towards 10th Street, and then 10th Street to the left, over the bridge, to the right on First Avenue, and then towards Kelso Beach and out of town.
So, I don't know if anyone on council has a question or a comment. Councillor Wright, Councillor Lemon.
I have a question and probably a comment as well. How fast can you pedal?
This is a very serious question. It depends on the wind direction. So I hope that I can do kind of 20 to 25 kilometers an hour. When the wind is against me, it will be a bit slower. If the wind is behind me, it's a bit faster, but I'm not going very fast. I have a tent with me and all kinds of stuff to make it. I have a BlackBerry too, and a camera. And I'm hoping to get places where I can stay inside, which I rather do because I'm not the youngest guy anymore. And yeah.
And have you ridden before between, I was most interested in, between Thessalon and Sault Ste. Marie and Massey. Have you ridden?
No, but we drove with a car there. It's not the greatest route.
It's like this.
Yeah, it's not as bad as the Rocky Mountains, but I have done very hilly trips, so I'm familiar with this. I biked through the Alps when I was younger, and I biked through Scandinavia when I was even younger, but it was when I was half my age.
Well, I think you're very, very brave, and I wish you well. I wish you all the best, and I want you to have a safe, successful trip.
Yeah, and you can follow me then on the website. I think Councillor Lemon had a question too.
Well, I want to congratulate you. That's one heck of a ride.
Yeah.
And I think bringing attention to violence in the home is a major, major issue. And I would make a motion that we support in principle the change the cycle ride, and our best wishes go with you, and that is my motion that we support in principle. And hopefully you can have a letter to that effect on your way. So if you're in any other municipality, you can let them know that your community supports you.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have now more people aware, and I think that's very, very important. And on behalf of the community, thank you. I want to offer also that as mayor, I could contact the mayors of the communities just in advance of your arrival at key centers along the way, and perhaps there'd be a municipal welcome for you at each point as well. So.
Okay, very nice. And I think you have my itinerary. I sent it around.
If I don't, I think I know where I can get it.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks very much for having me, and I'll think of you when I'm riding.
Councillor Purdon has a grilling question for you. You're going to be grilled.
Yes, a grilling question.
It's better now than later.
I'm wondering what your shirt is
Oh,
that
yeah.
you've got there.
Gee, I forgot. That's why it's so hot. Because I just got my bicycle jersey today. So.
No wonder you're hot. Yeah.
Oh, it's hot.
Oh, good stuff.
No.
Good stuff.
It was Councillor Purdon's idea,
yes.
because she's very interested in my safety to have a jersey that is very bright and obvious in the traffic.
Well, that's important.
So thanks, Councillor Purdon, for reminding me.
Just before you leave, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. And if I could just ask the clerk to hand you, this is another shirt in case you need a change.
Oh man! Yeah.
To take with you on your journey. And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
You too.
All the best. And now I will invite Amber Stewart, the legal counsel for Villeurbois Heritage Grove, or as we're affectionately calling it, Grove-less. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. As you know, I'm Amber Stewart, and I am counsel to Villeurbois. And this is obviously with respect to item 12B8 on the agenda. And as you can see, there is a report before council today which recommends approval of Heritage Grove's Phase 2 site plan application. And that approval is subject to conditions that have been recommended by staff. Now, our view is that Heritage Grove is an exemplary example of development in this city. It's a positive retail development which has brought jobs to the city, employment, and it's a beautiful building. I was just on the site myself. I think it's looking fabulous so far. And my clients need to continue that construction process. And in order to do that, and in order to retain the positive tenants that they have been able to attract to Owen Sound, it's critical that this application be approved as soon as possible. And so to that end, we are very pleased that this application is before council tonight for approval. But I have to add in a word there that it's finally before council for approval. The application was submitted in December, the beginning of December of 2012, and it was not circulated until 4 months later for comments to city staff and external agencies. Now, I see that there is a memo responding to my letter from Ms. Coulter. We were not provided with a copy of that memo, so I've had just a few minutes to take a look at it now. But based on my quick review, I can see that staff is taking the position that the application was not circulated because it did not comply with the zoning at the time. Now, our position, Heritage Grove's position, is that it has complied with the zoning bylaw since the application was filed. And nonetheless, the concerns of staff were ironed out and were resolved from staff's position through a zoning bylaw amendment. But at the end of the day, it's our position that that application should have been circulated and that staff could have provided comments on it at an earlier date. As it stands, we did not receive any comments on the application until May 27th, which is 6 months after the application was originally filed. And again, we're happy that it's here before council today, but we have serious concerns with a number of the conditions that staff have recommended for approval. And we are concerned with the implications of those conditions if council decides to impose them on the approval today. Delay will result inevitably, and that could, of course, cause further loss of tenants and jobs and business and the proceeding of construction of this development. So at this point, I would like to turn to the staff recommended conditions, and I'd like to review them. I know you have them before you in the report on the first page of the staff report. As you can see from the correspondence that I've filed, conditions 1A through E are generally satisfactory to us. The first condition that causes a significant concern to Heritage Grove is condition F. There's several aspects of condition F. The first relates to removal of the use of Arcadia juniper, and we have no concern with that condition. That's acceptable to Heritage Grove. However, staff has also asked that additional landscape details be provided for certain areas, and those are areas that are between the two buildings at the southern area of the development, the northeast corner of the property, and of course the northwest corner of the property, which is where the trees were previously located on the site. If I could ask to turn to the Phase 1 site plan. This is a plan that I would like to review with council today. So the first thing which I think is critical for council to understand is what is before council on this application and what was before council on the original Phase 1 application. It's our position that the areas that are shown in gray, this is the Phase 1 site plan that you're looking at. The areas that are shown in gray were not part of the Phase 1 application. And I don't know if you can, I handed up a little package at the outset, which is just a copy that looks like this. It's a paper-clipped page with 3 pages attached. You have a smaller version of this plan on the second page.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I don't believe staff got a copy of that.
It's the Phase 1 site plan that is being looked at. I handed up 10
whatever you were
copies.
highlighting, it would be helpful if staff had that in our legal counsel.
I do have 10, I provided a copy by email to legal counsel. Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. So, by way of background, as I'm sure council is aware, in late May, my clients removed the trees that were previously located in the northwest corner of this site. The staff report suggests that by doing that, my clients breached the first phase site plan approval that was issued and the first phase site plan agreement. The staff report also notes in the comments the discussion later on that constitutes an offense under the Planning Act, which is punishable with a fine up to $50,000 on conviction. Now, it's our position that these allegations are false and without merit, And we want to be absolutely clear for council that my clients, in our view, did absolutely nothing wrong by taking down the trees. My clients acted entirely within their rights and entirely according to permits that they were required to obtain to take down those trees. The first point that I think is important is that Owen Sound does not have a tree bylaw that regulates the removal of private trees on privately owned land. The only trees that were regulated on that area of the property were 10 butternut trees. Now, as I'm sure everyone here is aware, those butternut trees are listed as endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. And in order to remove butternut trees, it's required to obtain a permit from the Ministry of Natural Resources. Now, you may have seen the term retainable being used. That is a term that's used by the ministry to describe butternut trees that are not sick with the butternut canker. So they are healthy trees that could potentially reproduce and are therefore potentially retainable. Now, at the time the first phase site plan application was filed, those trees were healthy and they were retainable butternut trees. However, since the first phase site plan application was filed, my clients retained an arborist to go and evaluate the trees, and the arborist determined that they had contracted the butternut canker, and so they were no longer retainable and they were no longer healthy. And it's on that basis that my clients applied to the Ministry of Natural Resources for a permit to remove the trees. The Ministry of Natural Resources approved the permit and approved a planting plan to replant trees off-site on May 10th, 2013. That permit was copied to the city, and it wasn't until almost 3 weeks later, on May 27th, 2013, that the trees were removed. Now, going back to this plan here, as I've said, city staff have relied on the first phase site plan agreement to allege that my clients violated the site plan approval by removing the trees. In no uncertain terms, I am here to tell council that there is nothing in the site plan agreement, in our view, that obligated Heritage Grove to retain those trees. None of the trees, not the butternuts and not the other trees that were located in the northwest corner of the site. And it could have been very easy, had that been council's intention and the city's intention, to ask us to include a condition requiring that in the site plan agreement. It wasn't our understanding, based on discussions with staff, that there was any expectation that those trees had to be retained as part of a condition of site plan approval. The first page that I've attached in that package, that is a copy of the resolution that was approved by council in September of 2011. And taking a look at that resolution, in our view, the expectation of council at the time was clear. My clients wanted to do pre-grading works before site plan approval was granted. And staff had expressed a concern that the pre-grading works would have a negative effect on the protected butternut trees. And I say protected because they were endangered species at the time without a permit for removal. The condition that council imposed on the site plan approval required us to submit a butternut tree plan, which would demonstrate that the works that were going to be carried out on the site as part of the Site 1 approval would not have an effect on the tree protection zones of those butternut trees. That was the intention of that resolution, and in my submission, it's clear on the face of the wording of the resolution. That's why that condition was included. What my clients did to satisfy that condition, of course, was to submit the required butternut tree plan. The reason that this plan is important, as you can see, the butternut trees don't show on this plan. This is the Phase 1 site plan, which was approved by council and attached to the site plan agreement. Under the terms of the site plan agreement, this is the key plan that shows where development will be located on this site. This is also the key plan that shows the part of the property that is the subject of the site plan application. Now, it's a little bit hard to see on this screen, but if you look at the box in the middle to the right-hand side, that's a legend where it says site plan at the top of the box. In your copy, I've circled it with a yellow highlighter. There's a gray rectangle, and the label on that gray rectangle says future development subject to rezoning. The entirety of the northern section of this site was identified on the site plan submitted by my clients and approved by council, identified as being lands that are expected to be part of an application, a future development application subject to obtaining a zoning bylaw amendment. As you can see from this plan, the butternuts are not pictured there. The other trees that were located on the site are not pictured there. It's our understanding throughout that those lands are appropriate for redevelopment. We've never hidden the fact that they are slated for future development applications, as shown on the approved site plan. Now, we don't have a copy of this for the big screen, but it's attached to the site plan agreement that was approved. Your second and third pages in this package The second page is the butternut tree plan. That's the one with the red circles on it. This is the plan that we attached in order to fulfill the condition 2P that was imposed by City Council. Now, as you can see, the lands at the northern portion of the site, including the wooded area, are still all shown in gray. The only thing that's changed here is that the tree protection zones of the butternut trees have been circled on the plan in red. And as is shown by the condition, the purpose of those zones is to ensure that the works were not going to encroach upon the tree protection zones. These plans were simply to show the location of the existing butternut trees at the time, which were protected under the Endangered Species Act at the time. And the same comments apply with respect to the landscaping plan, which is the third stage, the third page in this package. Now, again, the city relies on the first phase site plan approval to suggest that we somehow violated the Planning Act by removing the trees. This plan, the butternut tree plan, the landscaping plan, none of those plans show any of the trees that were located in the northwest corner of the property, or the northeast corner of the property for that matter. The site plan agreement simply does not require my client to retain any of those trees. It does not impose an obligation on my client. My client acted within its rights with an approved permit from the MNR to take down the trees that were located in that area of the property. It's our view that they had every right to do it, and it was totally consistent with the expectation at the time the application was filed and approved by council. My clients knew that the butternut trees were an impediment to development, but once they became sick and they applied for a permit, they became entitled to remove them, and they did that. I don't want council to take this as a threat. That's not how it's intended. It's simply the truth. Those lands are too valuable for my client to accept a condition that requires them to replant the trees in that corner of the property. We are asking council to delete that requirement from the approval today. In order to allow this to move forward, we are asking council to delete that requirement. The gray areas are not part of the site plan application. They weren't part of the first phase. They are not part of the second phase. They will be part of a future development application. If that condition is imposed by council today, we will appeal it to the Ontario Municipal Board. We simply have no other choice. And that's just the reality that I'm here to advise council, and I'm here to ask you to remove that condition. Now, with respect to the remaining balance of my submissions, I'd like to quickly address the other conditions that have been imposed. So going back to the staff report now, we've gotten through 1E through F. 1G is acceptable to my clients. Condition number 2 is a requirement that additional barrier-free spaces be included in front of Building C and Building D. Now, my clients ask that the words "if possible" be added to the end of this condition. They're willing to do it if the parking can be reconfigured appropriately, but at the time they haven't investigated that possibility. So given the fact that the parking meets the zoning right now, we're simply asking that that condition be modified so that it's not mandatory, so that we will do it if we can. Conditions number 3 and 4 are acceptable. Condition number 5 is acceptable. Condition number 6 relates to an existing sidewalk that's at the south end of the site between the Winners and the future Value Village buildings. Now, right now that sidewalk is completed with asphalt and it's curbed. It's a completely safe temporary sidewalk, but the city has asked that it be replaced with a concrete sidewalk. We would ask that that condition be deleted as well, because it's safe at the moment. It will be demolished when future development occurs at the south end of the site, and it will be replaced with concrete sidewalks at that time. Condition number 7 is acceptable to my clients, and condition number 8 is acceptable to my clients. However, with respect to condition number 8, I do have to reiterate again, and as I have set out in my letter, the timing for execution of a site plan agreement is again very critical to my clients in order to proceed with development and retain the valuable tenants that they've got on this site. So, of course, we are agreeable to entering into an amended site plan agreement, but we do ask that there be a commitment that the site plan agreement be drafted and finalized as quickly as possible. As you know, there was quite a long delay between the first phase site plan approval and the finalization of the site plan agreement, and we are prepared to do whatever work is necessary to ensure that that can happen quickly. Condition number 9, parts of it are acceptable to my client, parts of it are not. As I've set out in my letter, 9A is satisfactory, absolutely. My client will pay the fees that they have to pay. 9B poses some concern because it appears to be a little bit ambiguous. We will, of course, obtain any approvals and licenses that are required by law. However, my clients have concern that this opens up the door to recirculate this site plan application for further comments, and we don't want that to happen because it's our view that it's been circulated, comments have been provided, that's been confirmed twice, that those are all of the comments. We want that to be the end of the story. So my suggestion for 9B is if everything after required by is crossed out and replaced with the word law, that would be acceptable to us. With respect to 9C, it's our understanding that no permit is required from the Conservation Authority and that this application has in fact been circulated to them already and that they have not provided any comments. So we are asking that this 9C be deleted, and in the end, if a permit is required from the Conservation Authority, obviously we will have to obtain that regardless of whether or not this condition is included. And the final condition is 9D, which relates to final approval of the plans. And once again, it's our position that this condition should also be deleted because the plans have already been circulated, comments have already been provided. It's our understanding that the plans are approved, and so final approval should not be required. Those are my comments with respect to the conditions that staff have recommended. But just to sum up, on the staff report, you can see the heading strategic areas of focus. And my client actually pointed this out to me today, that the first bullets here under strategic area of focus are actually quite pertinent to the submissions that I'm making before you today. Attracting people, businesses, and organizations to locate here and growing and retaining the existing business base. In our submission, this is what my clients are doing. They're bringing jobs, they're bringing positive development, they're bringing good retail tenants to the city of Owen Sound. It's our view that the lands on this site are completely appropriate for retail development. Obviously, the northwest corner of the site and the condition requiring us to revegetate that corner is the condition that is most seriously concerning to us here today. I just want to reiterate, my clients did nothing wrong by taking those trees down. And it's absolutely critical that council understand that those lands are currently zoned for commercial development. They are zoned for development, the trees have been removed from the site, and it is an appropriate location for retail development right along 16th Avenue East. So it's our submission that the condition requiring landscaping on the northwest corner of the site should be removed, and it should be addressed in a future development phase when a development application for that part of the lands is filed. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you for your...
And I said 16th Avenue, sorry, 16th Street.
16th Street.
Thank you, I knew I said that.
Owen Sound.
Yes.
13, thank you very much for your presentation this evening, and we will be dealing with this item under 12, I believe it's 12B 8. It is. Yes. Councillor Lemon.
Your Worship, I was going to suggest we move it forward. No?
It's the wish of council. I'm getting no's.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you.
When we do, I have some questions, and my memory is fairly good about what was said verbally by the developer, which is inconsistent.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll
Thank
be
you.
happy to answer questions if I'm called upon.
Thank you. Back to our agenda, we are at item 12A6. A report from the planner with regards to this, actually. Yes, it's just not on my agenda. Are there any questions of the, go ahead, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Richard Thomas, 803 Fifth Avenue A, East Owen Sound. I have with me tonight a petition signed by 260 people asking council to reconsider the status of the Marine and Rail Museum. My question is, may I present this to you now? Also with an apology, because I'm expecting that by the middle of next week we'll have well over 1,000 signatures. But because the RFP went out Friday afternoon, we decided to get this to you now to get our interest on the table.
If you'd like to leave it with the clerk, we'd be happy to receive that.
Absolutely.
Is that it? Okay, thank you. Any other member of the public here tonight to ask a question of council? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the 12A6, report from the planner. I decided to use paper, and I'm missing a full page. So we have, okay, thank you. Ministry of Municipal, there it was, and now it's gone. This is for deputations. If council is interested, if you could please put your mind to this for the upcoming AMO conference in Ottawa, August 19th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. If any member of council has a particular delegation that they would like to see us have, this is an opportunity to do so. If you could get those suggestions to me before the deadline, that would be even better. So thank you for that. Can you click on to the next item, because I don't have any of this? Thanks. We're now at the consent agenda. Thank you. So we have quite a number of items on the consent agenda this evening, ranging from agreements for special events through to a number of planning, no comments for Georgian Bluffs items, and some business license applications. Pardon me, new business license applications. Councillor Purdon.
I would move the consent agenda.
Discussion, Councillor Body.
Thank you, Worship. I just have one question. I note the ball licensing requires a $5 million liability naming the city. When we get down to the Sportsmen's Association, it's $2 million. We acting in two different policies, or is there a reason for that?
Through you, Your Worship, the security required for the ball tournament is $5 million. I think we heard from council that where we're serving alcohol, it's $5 million. The Salmon Spectacular, although it feels like it's all on the city's property, is actually where the alcohol is served on an adjacent property. It's just the parking of cars, so we did just ask for 2. If council wants to change that to 5, I'm certain they have 5, so it probably wouldn't affect the group if council wants to require 5.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And now I seem to have the articles in front of me. I hope we're at 12B1. Absolutely. We have a report from the Manager of Economic Development Tourism. This is a request for proposal for street vendors. It's council's direction on this one. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I would be happy to move the recommendation that we award this RFP to Anja Pink, a young entrepreneur. It's good to see her taking some initiative, and I wish her all the success, but I'll move the recommendation.
Great. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. 12B2, we have a report, purchasing agent with regards to proposal for a food truck at the visitor center. It's council's direction. Councillor Lemon.
I would move the recommendation. That area, it attracts a lot of people, and having a food truck there keeps people there longer, plus it's very pleasant to sit down by the harbor. Well, unfortunately, because of the trees, you can't see the harbor in a lot of spots. Sorry. But anyway, I would move the recommendation and we accept the proposal.
Okay, we have a motion. Councillor Wright.
I just have a question, Your Worship. Thank you. Are these vehicles, are they inspected by the health unit? I'm quite sure they would be, but do we let them know that they're there, or do they have to find out by themselves?
I'll go to the Director of Community Services on that.
Your Worship, I believe through the business licensing process, the clerk's office would circulate those to the health unit and approval would be required.
Thank you.
I have that confirmed.
People getting sick and going after us.
No. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have a report, again, from purchasing agent with regards to the city rental of vehicles. This was an item that council chose to defer from the June 10th meeting, or to the June 10th meeting. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move the recommendation that the rental of vehicles be awarded to Enterprise Rent-A-Car Company for the rental of mid-sized vehicles for city staff out-of-town trips at $38.79 plus HST.
So 30% savings, is it?
It's a savings.
Okay, we have a motion. Councillor Body.
Your Worship, this came up last meeting, and we put it over to be able to get more information. Mr. Ritchie asked for time to get more information. He's away. We haven't received that information. I would like to have a little more information on that, I think, before we move forward, unless...
We can get that at this time if you would so desire. Yes. Mr. Crowder, I'll invite you to...
So through you, Your Worship, we'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Councillor McManaman.
Just a question, how long is the term?
Through you, Your Worship, the term's 1 year.
1 year?
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion? Councillor Twaddle.
Well, just to Councillor Body's issue, there was a matter of interpretation that was raised to me in the two RFPs, and that has been clarified, and the original interpretation that's before us is correct. So it's not, the information was just to clarify an interpretation of the two different proposals with regards to when a car might be available for somebody who's leaving early in the morning.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Item 12B4, we have a report from purchasing agent with regards to the provision of engineering design services and contract administration. This is 8th Street East, 5th Avenue East to 7th Avenue East, reconstruction. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I'd be happy to move the recommendation. Question for Mr. McRoberts. However, this is for the contract administration and construction and inspection. Oh, no, sorry. This the additional is for the contract administration and construction inspection that will take place in the year that the construction is tendered. There must be some safeguards around that. So if council at budget time wasn't able to approve this project next year, they're still holding this price for years to come?
That's correct. Through Your Worship, I think the intent would be that the price would be fixed. There might be some type of cost of living or a inflationary index that might be applied to it, but for the purposes of the existing contract, it's understood that the contract administration and tendering portion of this work would be in limbo until council gave any approval.
And if I might just, if in future, this one and the next report, it might be helpful to just have, the scoring system seems pretty clear in both cases, this report and the next one, but if it might be helpful to actually have the scoring system, what the judges, what they're judging it on, experience and price and that type of thing. But again, in this case and in the next one, it's pretty clear the leading company was a clear-cut winner, so that's more just for future. So I'll move the recommendation.
Sure.
That we award the construction, that we award the provision of engineering design for the reconstruction of 8th Street, 5th Avenue East to 7th Avenue East to CC Tatham and Associates.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have a report from our purchasing agent, again, with regards to engineering design services and contract administration for the 2100 block reconstruction on 6th Avenue West. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation that we go with Gansby and Manero.
Discussion. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you to the director again. This is strictly to the road reconstruction. There's a number of water courses in that area as well. Does this touch those at all, or are we just talking in the roadway?
Through Your Worship, this project actually entails the reconstruction of a culvert, a twin culvert system that's basically the main problem within the area. It'll also deal with the reconstruction of the road, which will be required because of that work. And obviously, because of the reconstruction, we're looking at some sewer and water work as well. So the main driving factor for this is reconstruction of some stormwater drainage works.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have a report from the Director of Community Services with regards to the Owen Sound Rowing Club. Looks like we're rowing along there. What is council's direction? Councillor Lemon.
Your Worship, I would move the recommendation. Owen Sound is a natural spot for rowing, and coming from a college where they went to England quite regularly to row, I'm glad to see this developing in Owen Sound, and we should do everything we can to encourage.
Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Two questions. The first, this is a gravel floor for this building?
There will be just the gravel floors like what's on the parking lot today, so they'll use the base that's there.
And the second point, this is a 5-year agreement, a temporary structure, not prejudging what the rowing club might do 5 years from now or what future council might do, but there seems to be an implication that it can only stay for 5 years. It could be open to extending that if council wished at that time and the club. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is a 6-month removal clause, but the agreement could also be extended by the agreement of both parties.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. And unless I'm reading the plan wrong, they're building this at sort of at the 3rd Avenue edge. Why would they not put it closer to the water? They're going to have to carry their boats all across the parking lot to get to the water.
Through you, Your Worship, when Recreation and Parks Committee recommended that we look at a location on the east side, when you go to the north end of the Bay Shore, it looks like you have a huge area when you get there where you'd be able to locate a building. And you'll see in the report that we gathered together staff, the Grace Sawbill Conservation staff, and the rowing club group. And then we had to look at a number of factors, and it included proximity to the launch and water, the approach to the water, keeping in mind that their longest boat's 58 feet long. That's an incredibly long boat. The area that's fill and constructed, regulated, the location of municipal trunk services, the layout of the parking area and where the drive aisles were and parking, the 24th Street right-of-way, and the expansion plans for the wastewater treatment plant. So once you overlay all those constraints, the best location for the proposed storage building, it's 60 feet long, is adjacent to 3rd Avenue. It is in line with the McQuay Tannery building, so it will sort of line up along 3rd Avenue.
How far away from the McQuay building is it? Is it towards the end where you come into the parking lot?
Yeah, so if you look at the site plan that's on the screen, the bike park is on the right-hand side, the most northerly entrance to the Bay Shore.
Right.
So you just turn into that parking area. It's in the north end. It would be lined up with where the washroom building is, straight ahead towards the water in that general location.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Purdon.
Not so much discussion as comment, just I'm very, very pleased to see this here before council and that the rowing club has found a place to rest their boats and their hats and their oars. I know it's been a long time for them and for just the plan to get this happening, so this is, I think, very good for everybody.
Any further do we have a motion? We moved Councillor Lemon, that's right. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Item 12B7 is a report from the community planner with regards to rezoning application at 60 to 80 9th Street East. And that's page 121. Councillor Body.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two good news stories in a row. This is I move the recommendation regarding an application for rezoning of 6080 9th Street East and the two abutting properties to the north. Further, that council approves bylaw 2013, I guess that's going to come a little later, isn't it, 109, to amend the zoning bylaw, and that the clerk give notice of passing of this zoning bylaw amendment in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. So this is a zoning amendment for the Sydenham Group property, the corner of at the bridge there at 9th Street, to keep it moving forward. So this is a good news story. I'm happy to move it.
We do have quite a bit of good news in this community, and this is another one of those good news items, so it's great to see it at this point. Discussion, questions? Councillor McManaman.
No discussion, just an endorsement of the recommendation, and congratulate Mr. Peary and his management team, his architect and his planner. He's brought with he's been an exemplary developer in this community, and we appreciate all he's done and the work that his people have done with our staff to make this work, and it's just been a great opportunity for the city, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Peary personally. I'll certainly be voting in favor of the motion.
Councillor Lemon.
Your Worship, it's really great to see this moving ahead step by step. Some of us remember when the railway spur ran up to that property, and also that the main trunk sewer in Owen Sound was on the other side of the property. We've come a long way, and this is going to go a long way to enhancing the riverbanks and giving people the opportunity to live in a quality development downtown. So my congratulations. I know you've been working on this for some time now, and it's taken time, but this type of development always does, and congratulations.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. And again, I can say that every once in a while a project comes along that really is exciting. And this is one of those many projects that is very exciting, and I think I've said it a number of times, it's a real game changer, and I know we're looking forward to the shovel in the ground. Thank you. We have a report from the community planner with regards to Heritage Grove, the site plan application, Phase 2, 2125 16th Street East. You'll find that on page 134. Council's direction. Councillor Lemon.
Your Worship, one of the conditions that concerned the developer was the accessible parking. And as far as I'm concerned, that has got to stay in. That's non-negotiable. Accessibility is an important feature of development. And as far as I'm concerned, I would vote against the entire project if the accessible function was taken out. We have a committee in Owen Sound, the Accessibility Committee, which exists in many communities. And if you look at the new requirements under the Ontarians with Disabilities Act, I really don't think that's a good request to make. The other comment I'd make is about the trees that were cut down. When at a previous appearance, I asked the question about those trees and received assurance that at this point there was no plan to cut them. It really would have been nice. And no, there wasn't a motion. I thought that he was going to leave them, and I really feel naming the project Heritage Grove, but destroying the grove of trees that's been sitting there for 100 years.
Councillor Lemon, I'm going to suggest that you hold that thought, and we'll have our planner go over the report.
All right.
I think you might find some of the information in there. It came out very late today. I think you
Yes.
might find some of the information very, very enlightening.
Thank you.
If I could ask the Director of Community Services to bring forward the memo dated June 10th, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. If the clerk could just put on the screen the site plan, Phase 2 proposed plan. If I could, just with the indulgence of council, I would like to provide a little background in terms of the application that's provided in the report, and then provide some context that was provided to council in a memo today. So Heritage Grove has a property. It's 7.68 hectares, just over 18 acres. It's located on the south side of 16th Street, just east of the new 20th Avenue, east of the Home Depot development. Heritage Grove has applied to amend their Phase 1 site plan approval in order to construct Phase 2 of the Heritage Grove development. 2 buildings, both labeled Building D, so those are the ones located to the north on the property, are proposed to be constructed in the central west portion of the property. Staff have been advised that the western 780 square meter building is a proposed future shop, and the more easterly of the 2 buildings is a Dollar Tree store. The classification of stores is generally in accordance with the Statistics Canada classification system, so the total gross floor area for Phase 2 in those 2 building Ds is 1,570 square meters. The proposal also takes the building that was approved in Phase 1 at the south side of the commercial piece. You'll see the area that's been grayed out between Building A, Unit A2, and Building B. So the total gross floor area on this plan is 7,256 square meters. The site plan submission package included a number of plans that were submitted. In terms of the provincial policy statement, the proposed use within a settlement area on full services conforms to the provincial policy statement. In the city's official plan, the property is within the Sydenham Heights planning area. The southerly portion is designated residential and hazard. The area subject to the site plan application is restricted to the East City commercial designated area. The OP provides that where new development is proposed, consideration is to be given to the location and retention of as many existing trees as possible. This was raised during the initial zoning of the property at the time of site plan approval of Phase 1. At the time of the 2009 rezoning, it was noted that the trees would be addressed in detail at the time of site plan approval. Throughout the pre-consultation phase of this development, staff have encouraged the developer to examine opportunities to retain the woodlot. The Ministry of Natural Resources, as you've heard tonight, did approve a butternut tree planting plan which would allow the developer to remove the butternuts. Notwithstanding, the woodlot was outside the limit of grading. So if we could go to the previous plan showing the approved grading plan for Phase 1. The one previous to that, the next one. So that's the approved grading plan. You'll see the area there. It shows the limit of grading there along the woodlot as well as the northeast section of the site. So that area was to reflect the limit of grading. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the site is zoned C2, subject to special provisions. On March 18th, this council approved an amendment in order to reduce the required minimum lot area as well as to increase the maximum GFA within the general merchandise category. That amendment was required in order to permit the Dollar Tree store, which is classified as general merchandise. The development achieves conformity with this section based on a description of the uses provided with the site plan. Diligence will be applied as uses are proposed through the building permit and business license phases moving forward to ensure ongoing compliance with established minimum and maximum GFA caps for each commercial and service use categories. Specific clauses are also recommended for the amending site plan agreement that note any further changes to the site plan will require a subsequent application for a site plan amendment as well as compliance with zoning. This is reflected as a condition of approval. In terms of pedestrian and barrier-free access, during the Phase 1 development, the developer has constructed an asphalt sidewalk between Building A, Unit A2, and Building B. The approved Phase 1 drawings depict a concrete sidewalk at this location, and a condition has been included requiring the installation of a concrete sidewalk. I would note the Phase 2 site plan also shows a concrete sidewalk. a concrete sidewalk is required by the city's engineering standards. Accessibility Advisory Committee did make the recommendation with respect to additional barrier-free parking. In terms of the landscape plan, it's recommended as a condition of site plan approval that the landscape plans be modified to the satisfaction of the manager of Parks and Open Space, as well as myself, especially to address the lack of vegetation along the northern edge of the proposed east-west road. It's also recommended that the landscape plan be modified to address the loss of vegetation in the area in the northwest corner where the grove of trees was located. As well, the landscape plan is to be modified to address the area of buildings between Unit A2 and Building B, where there were buildings proposed and now that area is blank. The east-west road located in Phase 2, yard piping and catch basins and road bed work were constructed without approvals and inspections and contrary to the approved site plan of Phase 1. The city's CBO issued an order to comply, but the developer has not been charged. This area of activity clearly lies within Phase 2 and was installed within an area shown as not developed on the previous Phase 1 approval. A condition has been included requiring that these works be inspected and certified by qualified engineer to the satisfaction of the CBO and manager of engineering services. In terms of the foundation permit request, in the past, City Council has authorized staff to issue foundation permits. This approval was dependent upon the CBO being satisfied and also in all cases, the city has had a signed site plan agreement, often with security. Staff are not recommending foundation permits be issued in this instance. Future development. Staff have included a condition requiring that the wording future development and future development subject to rezoning be removed from the site plan. The developer should be aware that the approval of Phase 2 does not presume other future approvals relating to the site plan. I would note that the approval of the Phase 1 site plan, and you heard from Ms. Stewart tonight that there was an area on the site plan labeled as future development. Condition 2 of Council's approval of the Phase 1 plan stated that prior to finalization of the site plan agreement, modification of the site plan package be required to include, the first item is removal of the label future development subject to rezoning. That label was removed at the condition of Council. In terms of the Grey Salvo Conservation Authority, Ms. Stewart's correct. The Conservation Authority has been circulated. At this point, we do not have comments from them. At this time, I would point council to the memo that was provided to you today with respect to the comments made in the correspondence made by, provided from Ms. Stewart and made by her this evening. In terms of the first item, the timing between the approval of the Phase 1 site plan and the finalization of the agreement, it did take about a year between council approving that site plan and getting an approved agreement. That had to do with the developer addressing conditions, negotiation of a contribution towards servicing, and the negotiation of an agreement. At all times, city staff worked diligently and responded to issues in a timely fashion within the policy framework to move this development forward. Secondly, the delay between the submission of the Phase 2 plans and the circulation of the Phase 2 plan. The Phase 2 plan was indeed submitted in December. The submission did not comply with zoning in effect for the site at that time. The site plan was circulated following council's approval of the rezoning, which increased the maximum GFA in the general merchandise category. Condition 1A. In the Phase 1 approval, council required the future development labels be removed, as this suggested or implied approval. The site plan approval applied to and the site plan agreement is registered on the entire site, actually in this case on both the commercial and residential lands, as the residential piece was required for their temporary stormwater management. As is required with any development where a building permit and associated infrastructure occupies a portion of a property, the other areas must be graded, landscaped in order that they can be maintained in a safe condition as per the city's property standards. Any site plan approval for Phase 2 will again apply to the entire site and should address areas that do not contain buildings and parking, including the northwest and corner where the trees were removed, as well as the northeast corner that was also outside the limit of grading where fill has been placed today. Conditions 3 and 4. Depending on the direction of council, the completion date for all site works will be amended in an amending site plan agreement. Today, the completion date for on-site works is September 12, 2013, and staff are recommending the completion be extended to December 10th, 2013. I would note that the site plan agreement does not permit any occupancy of the site in advance of the completion of all on and off-site works. And that, council has in the past provided some relief with respect to those requirements to allow the occupancy of the site by winners. In terms of condition 1F, the revision to landscaping plans, staff is recommending to council that revised landscape plans be provided for the area north of the proposed east-west roadway, the area previously tree covered, the area between buildings A and B, and the northeast corner of the property. These areas were to be left intact and not graded or altered. The original plan did not show landscaping of this area, as the trees were to remain. As there was no grading or alteration approved for these areas, they were to remain undisturbed unless otherwise approved. This was reinforced to the developer in writing on several occasions. The grading plan addressed how the adjacent grade of the right-in, right-out road and other areas of the site would be graded into the northwest and northeast corners. So if we could just go back to that grading plan. The approved grading plan showed how the adjacent land would be graded into those areas. The subject property, as we've noted, is designated East City Commercial, and the official plan should be read in its entirety. But in terms of consideration of trees, I would point your attention to the section on environmental integrity, the urban forest, and a natural setting. And all of those policies support the preservation of existing trees and natural features and settings, specifically through the following. Where new development is proposed, give consideration to the location of existing trees in the preparation of the site plan and to the retention of as many trees as possible, subject to other appropriate design conditions. The city's record on the efforts to preserve trees contained in many letters, emails, and reports. Of particular note are March 29th, 2011, June 7th staff letters to Mr. Windrum, as well as a letter from Mayor Haswell dated June 30th, 2011. That letter followed a detailed inventory of the trees on site by city staff, actually paid for by the developer. It is reasonable to assume that the areas outside of the parking and building areas would be graded as per the approved plan and seeded in order that they could be maintained. In terms of the landscaping that's required as a condition of site plan approval, the developer should look to the city's official plan and site plan approval guidelines for direction. It's staff's intent that the northeast corner would be graded and seeded. Staff need to confirm this area has an appropriate ground cover in order that the stormwater management plan, as designed for the site, can function. The area between the buildings, if you've been to the site, you'll know what that area looks like. The grading in that area has certainly improved, but the buildings are being removed. We need to know that that's going to be leveled and sodded again so that it can be maintained and kept in an attractive condition. In terms of the northwest corner where the trees have been removed, the city has an OP policy that says the city shall promote a high standard of design in its public works and of private works, particularly in certain areas, including large commercial development. To this end, the city has approved site plan submission and approval guidelines that has a section devoted to landscape plans. That's what we're asking for to be reflected in a revised landscape plan for those areas. The butternut trees. The clause included in the site plan conditions of approval for Phase 1 had a specific condition, as you've heard, and as was presented a copy to council tonight. This was included to ensure compliance with the Endangered Species Act. This condition did not impose a particular condition on the other trees in the northwest corner. The intention of the city was made clear to the developer in many letters, emails, and staff report. This area was shown on the approved plans, particularly the grading plan, registered on title in the agreement, as outside the limit of grading. Not only were the trees cut in this area, but a roadbed and stormwater piping were installed also contrary to the approved plans. Staff believe that the work done by the developer from December 2012 until recently, when all the trees were removed, is outside the spirit, intent, and letter of the approved site and grading plans registered on title, as well as contrary to the servicing plans with respect to the yard piping. The barrier-free parking, as noted, this is a recommendation of our Accessibility Advisory Committee. The asphalt parking lot, or asphalt sidewalk, we've covered. The amending site plan agreement. There's a request by Ms. Stewart that the amending agreement be provided no later than June 21st. Staff and the city solicitor, who's here tonight, will work diligently. However, we can't promise an amended plan in that timeline. In terms of the engineering comments, Mr. Webb's provided clarification that's provided for you here this evening. It was their intent to make sure that the agencies issuing approvals should be notified and consulted about Phase 2 and allow comment and confirmation that their original approval still applies. Chief among them is the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, who should confirm that they're satisfied with the Phase 2 plan and confirm this in writing. We haven't heard from Grey Sauble on the Phase 2. We would just like that confirmation in writing. Your Worship, the recommendation is there on the beginning on the first page of the staff report. I would recommend to you the approval of the site plan subject to the 9 conditions. Given the comments here tonight, I think Council would want to make any approval clear that the approval applies to all the commercial lands, not just a portion thereof.
Thank you very much for that timely update, and I'm sure there are members of council who have comments and questions, and I'll reserve my comments until after all of council has had a chance to wrestle with this. Councillor Lemon, did you want to continue with your comments? And I'll
yes,
go to the
I
floor.
did, Your Worship. Thank you. One of the questions I have of the planner, when pipes go into the ground without our approval in this type of development, we can actually force them to be removed, can we not? If they have not been authorized?
Through you, Your Worship, Condition 7 provides for the developer to verify to the satisfaction of the CBO and the Manager of Engineering Services that the installed services have been inspected and certified by a qualified licensed professional. So we're giving them an opportunity to prove to our staff that in fact the piping that has been installed, the stormwater piping, is satisfactory. The details of how that will happen would be worked out through the Operations Department and the Office of the CBO.
Okay, the reason I'm asking that question, we don't know how it was installed. If it was installed, just scoping the pipe isn't going to tell you that. Do we have any idea?
Mr. McRoberts.
Through you, Your Worship, I think the intent would be that either the proponent has a consultant who has already inspected those works and will certify that that work was installed in accordance to the standards and conditions that are required, or in fact they will have to simply excavate the works to undertake that inspection to verify it. It would be up to their professional engineer to make that certification and that assessment.
Thank you. That's all the questions at this time.
Thank you. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank staff for that very detailed report. It's a very complicated matter, and it's good. And I would encourage anyone at home to go online and look at this report. It is a very detailed discussion. You hear lots of things back and forth. I'd advise people to go online and have a look at it and judge for yourself. I also want to congratulate the developer of the Phase 1 for winners. It's been a big success. A lot of people in the area have used it, and it's good for Owen Sound and its citizens. And it was, as was stated earlier, that we wouldn't take anything that was said as a threat. I'd ask that anything I'm about to say or other councillors say, don't take that as a threat either. View it in the same light. It's unfortunate that you feel that the phase 2 has been delayed, untimely delayed. I was going back, and again, I'd encourage people to go online and look at the background report and the number of times that this developer has not followed their site plan commitments, has not followed their site plan agreements, and come back to city staff or come back to this council and ask for some amendment. I started counting them, there's too many to count. So I think it's incumbent on all of us, if this phase 2 was slightly delayed or took longer than some had hoped, I think it's incumbent on all of us to get it right this time. We don't want what happened in the first phase to happen in this phase. The comments, I think Councillor Lemon sort of touched on them, but the comments about objecting to the barrier-free parking, 2 additional barrier-free parkings in a development of this size, our accessibility committee has recommended it, and if you feel you need to go to the OMB on that matter, then you need to do what you need to do, I guess would be my answer to that. The statement Ms. Stewart made that nothing obligated them to save the trees in question in that corner, and I guess the truth of that statement will ultimately be decided, or could be decided, by a higher authority than this council. Certainly, as Councillor Lemon has alluded, Mr. Windrum stood before this council in April, and when I raised the issue of some tree cutting outside of the area that in question, he seemed quite surprised that there had been, and was going to look into it. I mean, we could ask Rogers to provide the tape, but I'm quite certain that's what he said. So so clearly, I guess you'd see why the city was somewhat surprised when a couple of weeks ago there was a complete clear cut of the area. And again, I guess we'll have to see whether there's anything legally obligated on the developer's part, but certainly it was his commitment before this council that he was going to look into it, and any tree cutting, was quite surprised that there had been any at all. Question for Ms. Coulter. In these phases, there's certain types of development that are allowed in these buildings, and some that is not allowed. And you say there's diligence will be applied as uses are proposed for the building permit and business license phases. Now, certainly this developer would follow, I'm sure, would follow their commitments, but in perhaps future owners of these properties, what would be, how would we ensure that they're are going to follow the rules and regulations specific to these buildings?
Through you, Your Worship, there's a few checks and balances that the city can use. The site plan lays the framework on which the developer would apply for building permits. Once the site plan's approved and it complies with zoning, so for example, tonight you see that there's a Future Shop and a Dollar Tree. Staff know that there's room in the GFA, in the general merchandise category, and in the home electronics category to permit that. Moving forward to the next phase, we're recommending additional clauses, in this case in the amending site plan agreement. The third check would be then at the time of the issuance of a building permit that they would disclose who their tenant is. We would issue a building permit related to that use, and then the city has a business licensing process. That would be our last check. So when the business license comes forward, that would be the fourth check to ensure continued compliance with the approved zoning that's in effect for the property.
Mm-hmm.
So just to follow up to that, 5 years from now, another business wants to move in there. When they applied for a business license, that's the time you would check the zoning to make sure it's correct.
Through you, Your Worship, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Certainly, we welcome development. We need development. We but we also want to ensure proper planning. And again, I know I've said this twice, I'll say it again, for anyone interested, go back, go online, look at the background report. This has been a challenging development. I think that will enlighten you as to why it's been a challenging development. I would be happy to move the recommendation, Your Worship. And for this councillor, I just want to make it clear to the developer that we fully support city staff comments, we support our city manager, we support our directors, our planning staff, our engineering staff, in ensuring that proper planning takes place in this phase of the development. Thank you, Your Worship. Those are my comments, and I move the recommendation.
Good. We have a motion on the floor. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you. Councillor McManaman is more polite than I'm going to be, so don't misinterpret anything I'm going to say. I'll be quite clear. Ms. Stewart, I found your presentation to be personally offensive. The politest way I can characterize it is disingenuous. You talk about the length of time taken to circulate the site plan. You talk about, you use the word finally. You used, I forget exactly the phrase, but you want this site plan agreement ready the day before yesterday or as soon thereafter as possible. You never once referenced the extensive list of failed commitments that your client has not met. Agreements to provide information throughout this whole process by certain deadlines, drawings, engineering reports. There's a long list of them. They're all on the website. You should be fully aware of them if you are not. And to stand up there and to suggest that any delays in moving this project forward are the fault of the cities is insulting to our staff who have worked countless hours to accommodate this development. It's insulting to this council. Several months ago, work began up there without building permits on phase one, and yet council said, all right, we're going to accept that you've started the work and go ahead. Every time we have tried to be conciliatory and accommodate, it's been thrown back at us. You want to talk about the trees, and that to me was the most offensive part, to suggest that the developer had no obligation. When the official plan amendment and the first zoning amendment on this property went through several years ago, before Mr. Goyo's company owned it, Mr. Windram sat almost exactly where he's sitting today and said, we understand those trees are important and we will not cut them down. That was a commitment he made, representing a different property owner, but the same property, at a time when public had the opportunity to come forward and speak about that and talked about how important retaining that grove of trees was in that area. It has been raised, I think, virtually every time that this development has come before this council. And there have been commitment after commitment, meaningless, we now understand, that the trees wouldn't be touched. And I just find that behavior totally offensive on behalf of the members of the public who made it quite clear that that's what was going on. I don't agree that you totally within your right to remove those trees. Phase one grading made it clear you weren't going into that area. You weren't supposed to touch it. So I'm going to support the recommendations that are before us, but I do it reluctantly because this developer has not played fair with the city or with the people of the city. You can stand up and talking about bringing jobs to the city, and that's important, and we support that, and we have worked really hard to support it. But this developer has played fast and loose with every agreement they've signed, and I find that very difficult to swallow. I did not support allowing them to proceed without a building permit last fall. If those things happen again, I will not support allowing them to proceed. Doing the underground work that was not approved or authorized or inspected, I find distasteful. So don't take anything I've said as a threat, but it works both ways. And we will hold this developer, as far as I'm concerned, to every agreement that has been signed. Although we can go back and show you countless times when that has not happened, in small things and large things. And I'm going to ask you to tell us today, what date are you going to announce the new name for this development? Because as of today, there's no heritage left on the site and there's no grove. Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion? Councillor Lemon and Councillor Purton.
Well, I think you're getting the message about the trees. You may not take it seriously, but people in this community do. And through the whole thing, there was never any indication that you were going to chainsaw them all down. The first I heard about it was I got a phone call the next morning after it happened from someone called me and said there's been a slaughter of trees. I went up and looked. And I really feel very, very, I don't know whether I can support this. I'm still not sure. And as for asking for more concessions, no. We've given concession after concession, as Councillor Twaddle alluded to. And say, well, we don't want 2 barrier-free handicap spaces, or we want this, we want that. You're not in that position at this point. You've gone and put pipes in the ground without a permit. Now we're going to have to see if they were done properly. And if anything goes out on that site that is not expressly done, this council is of a mood that we will prosecute, which we can do when the construction occurs illegally. We didn't when you started building without a permit. We could have. We could have put a stop work order on the property. As you're well aware as a lawyer, you know that's the city's prerogative. So we have done everything in our power to help. Now it's time to work with us. In terms of restoration of those trees, I would like to see some large trees replacing them. Very large trees. I'm not talking about finger-sized saplings. I'm talking about at least wrist size or larger. And I will be asking for that at that time.
Councillor Purton.
Well, I am in support of the motion and speak in support of the motion. And I also feel that it's complex and difficult work, development, and council has a duty to both the citizens and to our own official plan and the Planning Act from this side of the table, and that requires a balance and a good working relationship. And since I've been here, there's been very little evidence of a true effort to try and work together in a way that works for the city and for the people who live here. And the trees, when I came on council, were almost like a symbolic part of this whole development. And I would wish that the developer could understand the importance of such symbolism and importance to the people of the community and to the council as well. We're not just talking about trees as vegetation, they're part of the community. And I really wish that the developer could give that some thought, of the importance of that, and how finding ways to move forward around some of those highly symbolic but also highly important parts of the community
might lead more of a win-win situation in terms of meeting your needs as a developer, meeting our needs for new investment, and meeting a community needs for attractive and retaining of what we have in this community.
Any other members of council wish to comment? Councillor Boddy?
Just strictly from an economic point of view, I want to see this project go ahead, and I want to see it go ahead soon. No threat intended, however, if you say to us, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to the OMB, I'm sorry, that's a threat. That's taken as a threat. If you want to get the job done, let's get it done. On one hand, you want to get it done quickly, so do we. But then you're saying, if you don't give us these changes, we'll go to the OMB. We both know that's a delay. Let's get her done. I'm probably the oddball out here because I'm not as upset about trees as everyone else is. I want to see bricks and mortar. I want to see those buildings there. I want to see our tax base grow. I want to see employment. I want to see it happen soon. I don't want to see delays. I don't want to be here in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks with another, can we change this, can we change that, let's move it ahead. We've got a planner here sitting in the room that everyone was kissing us behind. Why is that? Because he's easy to get along with. He's cooperative. We're moving forward. We're moving forward in a rapid rate. Your client has brought somebody out of an ivory tower on Bay Street to come up here and lecture us. Think about that. Think about the message you're sending there. That's not cooperative. That's sending a message that, hey, we're just gonna bring the best we can bring. We've already got a couple of OMB hearings coming through you and through a different lawyer. From your client, it's time to move ahead. Let's get the job done. Let's get moving. Let's get shaking hands. Let's get the agreement done. Thanks.
Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would say that Councillor Boddy said everything I was going to say, but I'll add a bit to that. I do want to see this project move ahead. I'm certainly in favor of yet again another change. I have been on this council trying to move this along with all of the constant changes, and lack of cooperation is the only word I can think of from the developer. There's really no trust here, and that's a big problem, which I think is why we're having to communicate with 85 different things in every single thing that we say to this developer, because we're trying to pin down Jell-O to a wall, and we're using every means available to us to do that, because what we're told by the developer is never really what happens. Having said that, I think I'd like to make clear that Section 1F 4 or 5, dealing with basically where all the trees were, as a councillor said, clear cut. Council is not, as the lawyer pointed out, asking that all those trees be replanted. I mean, the trees are gone. We can't go back there. What council is asking in that particular case is, there's a lot of landscaping here. What is the landscape plan going to look like? I do not think it's unreasonable to ask and it's not unreasonable to ask, what is the landscaping plan going to be? You've cut down all the trees that you stood here and said you were not going to do. We're not asking you, at least in what we have before us, to replant those trees. We're simply asking for a landscape plan. That's not unreasonable. This council has not been unreasonable. We're trying to get this development to go ahead, and the delays have not been on this side of, it has certainly been on the developer side. I'm not sure why. I would want to be going ahead with my development as quickly as possible and following all the rules, and even following those things that I said I was going to undertake and not change. As Councillor Boddy said, let's just move ahead and get this done. I think that's what we all we all want. I think that's what council wants. I know that has to be what the developer wants. So let's figure out a way of doing that and getting forward.
Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to repeat anything that's been said. Now, all I want to say to you is we have an excellent staff here, both in our planning department, engineering, and operations, and I know that they're willing to sit down with you and work things through, and I know that that can happen. So please, sit down with our staff, work through the things that have to be worked through, and let's get moving on this and get it finished. It's badly needed in our community, and we want to see it finished. So work together, please.
Ms. Corsi?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. First, I want to thank staff for just extraordinary effort on this file that has consumed them for hundreds of hours, quite frankly. We've stood on site in the middle of the night to try and figure out how to get the winters open. We have had to confirm in writing over and over again what exactly is being asked for. I'm not sure I can agree that we can just sit down and make this work. I think it has to be in writing. I think now we need confirmation from the experts on the other side in writing, in black and white, because it hasn't worked just having discussions. It's just taken way too much time. When we get to a point in a project where I have to have our solicitor sitting in the audience and my planner, I've had to finally say last week at one point, I need you to take a time out. This is consuming you. You can't make it right this time. It is time to take a breather. And that's what this project's got to. It is very, very unfortunate. I've been a planning director in the GTA and have never seen something get to this degree. And don't want to see any other project in this city get to this situation. I have to say, council, from a staff perspective, to get certainty in this project, maybe the OMB is the best route. And it may be less costly to the municipality in the end. Because every time I have our lawyer come up to sit here and to review things and have my staff spend the countless hours they've had to spend, that is time that the taxpayers of this municipality have to pay for.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes, I just want to say I appreciate what our city manager has just said. I was looking at all of the commitments that are on here, and I was going to ask how we were going to go forward. And I support that they go in writing, and I will support the recommendations.
Okay. Further discussion to the motion? Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just there was one. Ms. Coulter had mentioned something, an additional a recommendation to the motion about applying this all to. What was the exact wording of that?
Just to be clear, given the comments made tonight and the suggestion that perhaps the site plan doesn't apply to the commercial site, I would recommend that the initial paragraph, that the City Council received the report from the community planner regarding the Phase 2 site plan approval based on the site plan prepared by Scholarly and Associates, last revised October 3rd, and approve the amendment to the Phase 1 approval, which applies to the 7.8 hectare area subject to the following conditions, just to be clear that it applies to the entire site.
That's fine, Your Worship. We'll add that to the motion.
Okay. Is everybody clear on the motion? To the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. I would also like a motion.
I would call for a recorded vote.
Okay.
Just to get it on the record.
We'll do a recorded vote. I'll ask the clerk to poll council.
Councillor Adair?
In favor?
Councillor Body?
In favor?
Councillor Chamberlain? Councillor Lemon?
In favor.
Councillor McManaman?
In favor.
Councillor Purdon? Councillor Twaddle?
In favor?
Councillor Wright? In favor. Mayor Haswell?
In favor.
Thank you. That passes unanimously with 9 votes in favor.
Thank you. I need a motion to receive the memo from our Director of Community Services, moved by Councillor Purdon. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Just before we move on to the next item on the agenda, I can't stress enough how, first of all, congratulations on the phase that is up and running so far. It certainly is a welcome addition to our community. We certainly appreciate and value the investment, and we certainly appreciate the jobs that have been provided through that particular phase. I can tell you that when it comes to the planning component, it would be most helpful at our end if the proponents would please read our official plan clearly. This community and this council has very, very strong views on how development and how planning will proceed. You're well aware of the need for sustainable development. This council has repeatedly passed motions and supported official plan that not only addresses sustainable development, but also addresses the need for a local community to decide how it will look. This is something that goes far beyond here, gets into OMB reform, and if we end up at the OMB over a tree and a couple of other things, I think that's something that has yet to be seen. I think it would be a shame, but I think it would be shame on you. So I can say on behalf of council, I hope that the work speeds up. I hope we get the job done, and I certainly look forward to a fully engaged development at Heritage Grove. I'll stop talking before I get angry and really say too much, so I thank you. We'll move along to the next item. Councillor Boddy.
Just to be clear, I think we just moved a motion to accept Ms. Coulter's report. We should have included with that the letter and everything. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I just
we'll do
wanted
a
to make
separate.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll move it now if
Thank
that's,
you. Yeah.
just to make sure it's all tied onto the record.
Super. This is a motion to receive Ms. West's correspondence. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Stewart, yes. The lawyer of Villebois. Yes, thank you. Okay, on to good times. Report from the facilities booking coordinator with regards to a request for beer garden approval. Councillor Purdon.
I'd love to move that we have some fun at Duncan McClellan Ballpark for the annual Tom McCartney Memorial Slow Pitch Tournament and approve that recommendation.
I can tell you that the Director of Community Services wants to comment on this as well, and I'm really curious.
My apologies, Your Worship. This is our first designation of a municipal significance, and I noticed today that missing from the recommendation, it should also say including entering into an agreement with the clauses required as per the approved policy. So that was our miss. So if we could approve it with that one change, I would appreciate it.
The mover says that's fine. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Just to note that this municipally significant event, all the proceeds are going to a charitable organization. I'm assuming they're providing a pre- and post-budget as well?
Through you, Your Worship, they are.
So this is an excellent template as we move forward with these events, looking at designating them as municipally significant. This is a great template for these types of tournaments or whatever it might be, providing budgets, donating the money to charity. It's a great event, so thank you.
City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add that, in fact, we are ahead of the curve on this. Other municipalities are asking to look at our template and how we're dealing with municipal significance.
We're ahead of the curve on a lot of things. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have a report from the facilities booking coordinator, an execution of agreement with an old friend. What is council's direction on this? Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. A question to the director. Mr. Sharp is bringing forward the concert factory. What do we know what that is? It doesn't actually say what he's bringing forward.
Through you, Your Worship, the Concert Factory, Inc. is Mr. Sharp's business. We're not, he hasn't disclosed who will be playing at the concert. We just know that it's a concert scheduled for Saturday, August 10th. A portion of the fee is non-refundable.
So there is a recommendation, and there's a number of conditions in an appendix marked A. Seems pretty straightforward. It's council's direction on this. Councilor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I will move the recommendation that we execute agreement with Mr. Richard Sharp and the Concert Factory for an event on Saturday, August 10th.
No, not anymore. It was looked after. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from Manager Public Works with regards to our 2013 winter control review. And I welcome Mr. Delibek this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. I'd like to cool things off in here a little bit, talk about winter. I'll just go through some of the summary points of the report, just to highlight some of the things that unfolded throughout the winter season. Doing the weather analysis, we found that this past winter was a significant winter and is comparable to the winter seasons of 2005, 2007, and 2008. Some of the issues that we first fell into was that there was initial weak communication with the public and staff of the goals and objectives of the policy. There were also some staff challenges with the implementation of the new policy. For the most part, with the exception of the major winter event that we experienced at the end of January, largely due to the very cold temperatures we experienced, the salt wasn't as effective. Was the only time that we weren't really able to satisfy the level of service policy that we adopted in the fall. Additional training for staff is required to provide more effective and efficient service, as well as some cross-training. Staff have developed some improved documentation tools to address the poor record keeping for a liability standpoint. We're also looking into implementing a GPS tracking systems for greater documentation and a more effective service. The winter maintenance of sidewalks was one of the things that came up the most from public. That's going to require a comprehensive review to establish the level of service, including the criteria and the priorities for sidewalk clearing. We'll also need to review the snow removal in the downtown core, and it's the compensation for performing that type of service. We'll also come back with some amendments to the winter level of service policy to incorporate some of the improvements, as well as the recent changes to the minimum maintenance standards, in particular the weather monitoring section. One of the objectives in the fall was to reduce the cost of overtime through the winter season. We were successful in achieving that goal when comparing that to the winter seasons of 05, 07, and 08. Salt usage is also another comparative factor, and comparing those to this season to those seasons, we're also within 2%, so that's also another measurable. And an important measurable to take note of is that the cost per lane kilometer compared to all other years has been reduced by 5 to 8%. So that's a good indicator of success. In order to try and reduce our salt consumption, we're going to look at introducing or implementing the pre-wetting technology. And we'll also be developing more communication packages with the public relations coordinator to get more timely response out there to the public of adverse weather. Based upon the current expenditures projected to the end of 2013, the budget may be exceeded by $40,000 to $280,000, depending on the severity of the winter that we experienced in November and December of this year. This isn't a reflection of the winter maintenance policy, this budget shortfall, but rather that the budget's been established over on a 10-year average. So you have your highs and you have your lows. So the overrun or the shortfall can be accommodated through the reserve established for this purpose. And with that, if council has any questions, I'll happily address those.
Thank you. And on this hot night, it's interesting to talk about snow removal. I'm sure there'll be some questions. There we go. Councillor Lemon.
Well, one of the things I've noticed on Grey County Road 1, and I'm sure it's on other county roads, but that's the one I'm most acquainted with, they lay down before a storm event brine on the, is that what you meant by pre-wetting, or are you just talking about putting some water on the salt?
No, what you're referring to is the pre-wetting technology is where on our trucks we would wet the salt just prior to the dry salt falling onto the road, so it's actually wet, and that starts the brine action faster and helps a faster melting action, so it's more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about what's done by the County of Grey with the actual spraying on the road prior to the event?
That technology you're referring to is known as anti-icing technology, and you're probably seeing those pencil lines on the highway. What that is done using a different type of chemical to basically sit in the pores of the road, and you can see the melting action. They use it a lot on the 400 series and in Toronto. So that technology we haven't explored yet, but I think it's on the doorstep.
Certainly cheaper than heating all the streets. Councillor Burden.
I have kind of a question and kind of a comment, I guess. With the sidewalk review and the sidewalk clearing, are there accessibility issues as well in terms of sidewalks? Because those were some of the complaints that came forward of people who had mobility issues and had a lot of trouble even accessing the bus because the sidewalks were not cleared. So is that part of an accessibility strategy, or that was the question? I have a comment too, if I can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is the intent of this review, is to go through and really look at the issues about sidewalks in every aspect, including accessibility.
Okay. And the comment was just coming into year 2 of the new policy. I know it was really hard with the communication to try and get the word out. If your department would even consider a little more upbeat messaging, something that will kind of catch people's attention. I don't know, now that we've got through it once the hard way, would there be a way to kind of engage people more, or do a little more upbeat and a little earlier so people know what to expect?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. It's difficult sometimes to predict the weather, but absolutely, I think that we can find a way to engage the public for sure.
Okay, I've got a few speakers, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor Boddy?
My questions are going to almost repeat Councillor Purden's, but so we had a new policy, and I note in your report that we all of us didn't communicate that new policy very well at the start of the season. And I think it was Councillor Twaddle that used the phrase that I picked up on. The policy, in effect, was that we are not going to call in for overtime if there is an accumulation of a few centimeters or less. Is that basically what the policy was to do?
The policy was basically to do the snow clearing on a priority sequence rather than doing all roads at the same time to bare pavement.
So we wouldn't be calling in overtime if there was just a small amount. Right. So at the start of the season, we got whacked with one heck of a storm, and that had nothing to do with our policy, correct?
That's correct.
And this winter was one of the worst in...
It has the potential to be the largest in snowfall accumulation, depending on November, December.
So it had nothing to do with, we had had 20 more, well, if we had had 20 more plows, I guess we'd be the city of Toronto, but,
No, we wouldn't.
yeah, or maybe not, we'd, not going there. And as you've just pointed out, you were putting together a policy that will put together a plan on sidewalks of how you clear them going forward from what you learned this year, and that was a big question for people.
Yes,
That's the
absolutely.
intent.
I've learned quite a bit this year.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Councillor Chamberlain and then Mr. McRoberts.
That's my comments around the GPS, and would that give us a chance to communicate a bit better with the public about where we are and what's coming up?
Yes, absolutely.
That's the plan around that?
Yes, that would be one of the value-added services out of that type of technology.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Mr. McRoberts.
Yes, just to follow up on a couple of the councillors, if I may, through you, Your Worship, with respect to some of the comments that made. Councillor Lemon had indicated the de-icing technology and spoke to it. It is a specialized piece of equipment that we would require because it requires tankage, a truck with a tankage to carry the brine and then to apply it on there. So there would be a fairly significant asset to have to purchase to be able to bring that technology to the city. But certainly we can investigate it and look at what the cost benefit would be with respect to using that type of technology and the ability to reduce the amount of service we have to provide on our roadways. So we'll certainly undertake that effort. The other one was with respect to sidewalks, and sidewalks are much more challenging than roadways, strictly from the standpoint that there are no minimum maintenance standards for winter maintenance on sidewalks. So you're pretty much left to the whims of the court system and what case law has said. So what you basically have to do is we have to establish for our own purposes what our policy would be and what level of service we will provide, because that will become our defense. So.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And with respect to sidewalks, I think if there was some way that we could somehow manage not to clear the sidewalk before the road is plowed, because they clear the sidewalk and then they plow the road and shove it all back on the sidewalk, that seems to be the biggest complaint I get. And that does happen, and it certainly happens on my street because the plow goes down 3rd Avenue, and I think we still plow the county roads, at least we did last year. We'd go down so fast that it would just throw the snow right up over the sidewalk, and then the plow had already gone down, and then the plow doesn't come back for a while. So that was one of the biggest problems that we have. So we need to somehow work out a program where the sidewalk doesn't get plowed till after the road's cleared. I don't know how you do it, but you guys are the magicians.
No, absolutely. Curb-based sidewalk is one of my pet peeves. It's difficult to do.
Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of questions for Mr. Dielebeck. In your report, you say that the city maintains in the winter, comparing us with other municipalities, we endeavor to maintain twice the average length of sidewalk per machine. Could you just talk about that for a sec?
Yes, we own 3 sidewalk machines that are dedicated to the city streets. And on average, we maintain twice. We maintain right now 99 kilometers of sidewalk, which is twice per machine of our neighboring municipalities. So.
Interesting. You talk about the wing operations and having 2 operators and perhaps a change to that. What are you looking at as a change there?
What I'm looking for is to provide the operators with training, one-man winging training, to allow more efficient use of our resources in the hours where traffic is very minimal, or in areas of the city where there's unlikely to be a lot of pedestrian traffic.
And I had one more question, just let me... Oh, the salt usage. I was somewhat surprised that we were only down, was it 2% from historical salt usage? I thought we were using a mix of sand and salt last year.
We were not using a mix of sand and salt last year.
Were we not, to Mr. McRoberts, were we not looking at that, of reducing the salt usage and putting sand in there?
We did look at that technology. Unfortunately, the use of sand and salt is more orientated towards those cold weather events. And in fact, the weather event that Mr. Dielebeck spoke to was one of those events where we actually had to use sand because it was so cold that the salt became ineffective. So We're continuing to review technologies which will help us be more efficient with the use of salt, and that includes training, that includes the use of pre-wetting applications as is illustrated in the report and the figure that's provided with it. Applying dry salt basically to a road basically allows it to bounce off and doesn't provide the most effective application. Pre-wetting speeds up the process and also reduces the wastage, I guess, of salt.
So really, the wrap-up, though, depending on comparing us to other heavy snowfall years, it looks like we saved $40,000 in overtime costs for staff.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Twaddle.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that one point that both Councillor McManaman and Councillor Boddy mentioned in terms of overtime and the use of staff. One of the key things I believe in this new policy was the elimination of pre-shift overtime. So having the crew start earlier in the morning and end earlier in the day meant that they were not working early morning overtime every time it snowed overnight. In previous winters, the crews would start at 7 o'clock in the morning, but if it started to snow at 2 o'clock in the morning, they would be called in on overtime and then stay to finish the regular shift. If I understand correctly, where a lot of the savings came from is that the crews were here, and particularly the first snow event we had, which started about 5 o'clock in the morning, the crews were at work already, so they were able to react more quickly than they would have. But if it stops snowing before that regular shift ends, we don't keep staff on overtime to just automatically finish a shift. So that's where a significant amount of the savings came. We were able to manage that time better. And that was the intent of the policy, and I think that's where most of the 40,000 came from.
Yes, with the shift starting at earlier in the morning, overtime was occurring at the end of shift rather than prior.
You would have more control over that because you wouldn't necessarily keep everybody. Previously, the overtime was incurred before the shift started and everybody stayed till the end of the shift.
For that shift,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, so it gave you better management control.
That's right.
Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, just one question. I thought some months ago when we were discussing winter control that we were going to start looking at the use of sand. And I'm rather disappointed that we haven't gone farther because sand is a lot less environmentally toxic than salt. And second of all, it's a lot less expensive. Are we going to be doing anything this winter to increase the amount of sand and decrease the amount of salt?
I'm aware of the environmental impacts that salt has on the environment. Unfortunately, salt is probably the best chemical agent to use to melt snow. In cold temperatures, sand is much more effective. Right now, we mix our winter sand with 20% salt, 80% sand. And as Mr. McRoberts was echoing on the event at the end of January, the temperatures were so cold that salt would just stay in its solid form. It wouldn't even start melting. So that's when sand is the most effective, is in those types of temperatures.
For many years, they used mainly salt with just a little sand here. It worked quite well.
Okay, Mr. McRoberts.
Yeah, just to follow up as well to Councillor McManaman's point about the savings realized through overtime, I just want to make sure that remind council as well as the public that there were also savings achieved through the attrition of 3 positions in the Public Works Department. So we did reduce some staff to basically meet the level of service that we provided. Even with that reduced staff, we were still able to provide the level of service that was included in our policy, and we were able to reduce some overtime. So there are more savings than just $40,000 that were achieved.
Thank you. Further discussion, members of council? Mr. de Liebeck, I have to thank you for all your work on this, and I know that last year was particularly difficult in terms of the communication piece. People are passionate about getting the snow out of the way and getting it out of the way quickly, and I think all of us learned quite a bit about what our community wants and what our community expects, and I can say that for myself, I do look forward to a really comprehensive communication plan, rolling out, the email contact on the side of the trucks and so on. Just a real splashy event. It snows, it's winter, it's Canada, and sometimes patience doesn't always enter into that mix. So I appreciate your work, and I wish you all the best this year. Thank you. We need to move receipt, please.
I would move receipt of that report. Thanks.
Would council like to see the communications plan when it's developed, or you're okay with that? Okay. All right, we'll let it go. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the communications plan will come through the Operations Advisory Committee, ultimately to council, so council will be privy to that. Thank you. We have a verbal report from the Manager of Engineering Services, and I believe our consulting engineer, with regards to the work that's being done on the 4th Street East storm sewer. For people watching, that is located what we affectionately call sort of the back entrance to Harrison Park. And those of you that walk through there will be familiar with that area. So, Mr. Webb.
Your Worship and members of council, I just wanted to make a couple of initial comments. Obviously, the reason we're here tonight is because there's been some expression of concern regarding a couple of, I think, the major concerns, and certainly through council and the public, regarding this project is A, the duration of the construction and the delays of completion and the impact on the users of the Harrison Park Fitness Trail. As your worship mentioned, it's at the north part of the north end of the trail, and where the trail access is at 4th Street East and 5th Avenue East, not much further south than that, we've got the construction site. And secondly, I would say the aesthetic aspects of the project, the impact to the visual of the slope and the required extent of construction and the engineering design is also a concern to many people. And we wanted to bring forward, I guess, a little bit of a recap tonight about the background of the project, why we're where we are today, some of the challenges and issues and problems that have arisen during the construction, and then where we're going forward. On the screen, and for the members of the gathered here tonight in the public, we've provided a bit of a graphic representation of the catchment area or the drainage basin. It's quite large. I think it's about 85 hectares. It's bounded by, surprisingly, in the north, 8th Street East, in the south, roughly 4th Street East, in the west, 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue East, 6th Avenue south of 6th Street and 7th Avenue north of 6th Street, all the way to 11th Avenue East, which is an unopened road allowance or not a road allowance at all. That's approximately just south of Sydenham Community School, running southerly. So, by the way, this map was produced on Cosmos, just a nod, tip of the hat to our new GIS and mapping information system that the city has. It was fairly easy to produce this based on, obviously, the heavy red line outlines the catchment area. So that'll be something that Rakesh will probably refer to, but it's certainly a significant area, and there's a significant volume of runoff and stormwater generated in this area when there is a storm or a snowmelt. So Rakesh is actually just going to provide some brief remarks of background, and then we'll be able to entertain any questions from council. Thank you. Rakesh Sharma, who's the project engineer from Genevar.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Worship and the council.
Welcome, Rakesh.
I will start off with the background for the project. Obviously, the project is on 4th Street East. The project starts at the intersection of 4th Street East and the 6th Avenue. And there is a 750 dia corrugated steel pipe that runs down the hill through a narrow trail, which is called Goat Path by some of the neighbors. Along that goat path, a couple of years ago, the sinkholes started appearing, and they were beginning to appear because of the corrosion of the CSP pipe. The water was not properly flowing through the pipe and eroding the soil and making the sinkholes to happen. And as a result of that, the steep slope along the 6th Avenue was being threatened. So that was one part of the project. The second part of the project is to the south of this goat path, there is a ravine where a 500 dia, another CSP pipe, openly discharges into the ravine. And whenever the big runoff comes down the hill or in the valley, it causes erosion of the soil, and all that muddy clay water does go into the river. In addition to that, what happens is that it was beginning to destabilize the adjacent areas, and if it is remain uncontrolled, eventually it could threaten the hills on the north side as well as the south side. In regards to the design criteria for the project, as Chris said, the catchment area is roughly about 85 hectares. In terms of acreage, it's about almost 190 acres of land. The runoff from that for a 5-year storm will create a runoff of about 6.8 cubic meters per second. For those who understand the imperial units, it amounts to roughly about 90,000 gallons a minute. So during the event of a 5-year storm, a flash flood of about 90,000 IGPM could be coming down in that area. The existing 750 dia CSP is not big enough for a 5-year storm. It probably has a capacity less than 2-year storm. Other criteria was to reduce the sediments. Right now, currently, the road washings, the sand, it washes down into the river, and there was a need to reduce the amount of sand that will go into the river. So the construction that has been designed, the channel, the energy dissipator structure, that will arrest some of the sand. Another criteria was that when the water will be coming down from this pipe and eventually come down the hill in the valley, it will have very significant velocity, which will cause the erosion of the bank and will, of course, disturb the fish habitat. Let's move on to the project. So the project is to replace this 750 dia, roughly about 30-inch CSP with a 1 meter dia fiber reinforced plastic pipe called Hobus pipe. That's the name of the manufacturer. It's a smooth walled pipe, and the construction method that was to be adopted was tunneling and boring rather than open cut excavation, because at the starting depth at the top of the hill, it was needed to be about at least 8 meter deep. So doing an open cut excavation will remove lots of trees and will eventually destabilize that hill. So the method adopted was a trenchless method, and in this particular case we used tunnel and bore method. Another key component of the project is a thrust block. So what happens is that when you have this 90,000 imperial gallons per minute of flow coming down the pipe and changes the direction, you got an immense force at that joint, which it will try to come apart. So how do you prevent the pipe from coming apart is by providing a concrete thrust block, which is a massive structure in our project. The 90,000 gallons per minute flow that will come down at the outlet, it will have roughly a velocity of about 50 feet per second. So it will have a significant eroding force. So what we have is, at the outlet of the pipe, we have an energy dissipator structure made from concrete blocks and armor stone. So the idea is that structure will reduce the velocity from about 50 feet per second down to about 12 to 13 feet per second. And the water from the energy dissipator structure will flow down in the open channel, which is a stone lining channel. And there are a series of cascades to break the energy so that we don't have water going down into the river very, very fast. The capacity of the channel is obviously for the hose pipe, which is 1 meter dia, and that 500 dia CSP that was eroding the valley there. Talking about the soils, the superficial soils are, or rather on the top, silty and clay material, which is highly erodible. It has very high water content, which makes it really, really easily erodible. And that was the reason for providing a heavily stone-lined channel. Construction. The project was tendered and awarded to EC King Contracting in the first week of October. The contract price is roughly about $635,000. The construction commenced roughly around October 22nd. And actually we had a very good construction progress up to about this first week of December. Between October 22nd and the first week of December, the contractor was able to install a deep 3 meter dia, almost 9 meter deep manhole at the top of the hill, which was supposed to be the most difficult part of the project, but it went on very smoothly. The hose pipe, the contractor was able to install the hose pipe except the thrust block by that time too, around the first week of December. The stone line channel, roughly about 80% of the stone line channel, which is part of the contract, was also constructed by the first week of December. The original completion date for the tender was for the contract was end of December. The new completion date is June 30th without penalty. Now let's talk about what caused the delay of the whole project. The thrust block construction, it turned out to be it was a structure which was fairly deep. It had to be anchored to the shale rock, which required almost about 4 meter deep excavation. And the contractor was doing that work during some difficult conditions. We had frequent events of snowmelt or rainfall, and on top of that, I think the contractor was a bit negligent. So on January 15th, when the contractor was pouring the concrete for like a working mat for the thrust block, about 45-50 minutes later, a portion of the hills slid down in that area. Now, once that happened, obviously the focus shifted from construction to remediation, because we had 2 or 3 homes on the top of the hill on the south side. There was a danger that if the further erosion happens or the landslide occurs, then we could be threatening those homes. So immediately the contractor's focus was to rehabilitate that slope. Geotechnical engineer from the contractor and our geotechnical engineer got together, figured out a way to stabilize that slope. And we had a very, very narrow window to do that, because the day when it was done, after that, the very next day we had a forecast for very, very heavy snow squall. So eventually the thrust block was completed on May 10th. Between January 15th and May 10th, it looks like the project was stalled. It was not completely stalled, but it definitely had a very slow progress. The thrust block had to be redesigned, and there was a lot of investigation that the subcontractor did about the profile, the shale, because of whatever information his engineer wanted. He had to come to the site and provide that. After May 10th, we have lost some time. because there was a change in thought process about the 500 dia CSP that I talked about earlier, which was causing the erosion of the valley. That pipe was found to be again similar to the 750 dia, the corrugated steel pipe. The bottom is corroded. So around that time, it was thought that maybe we could eliminate that CSP pipe and do it differently. So a CCTV inspection was done for the pipe, but it hit a obstruction. In any case, to abandon that pipe, we asked for a price from the contractor. The price was fairly high and would have caused further delay to the project. So that idea has been dropped. So going forward, as I mentioned, the target completion date is June 30th. The contractor has been a little slow in starting. I mean, they started the work today. They mobilized the equipment yesterday. And if we do not get heavy rains tonight, they should be laying the first layer of the energy dissipator structure. And once that is done, the progress should be much faster. So we are hoping that the contractor would be able to complete the work by June 30th. That would include completion of the stone lining channel, the energy dissipator structure. Access road is already there, so all they have to do after that is whatever surplus material is there, it needs to be redistributed, topsoil and hydroseeding. The only work that contractor has said that they may not be able to complete is the old 750 dia pipe that is right now bringing the storm flow to the river, that needs to be abandoned by filling it with sand. So that's a work that may still happen in July, but it probably should not affect anybody in the neighborhood. That would conclude the update on the project.
Thank you.
If there are any questions?
Thanks very much, Rakesh. I appreciate your update. And as someone who grew up in that area, arguably some people would say I haven't grown up, but I did grow up in that area, and the idea of an open pipe is something that as a kid would have been quite interesting to crawl inside and investigate. So I'm a little bit concerned that that isn't going to be closed off. Or tell me
Sure.
that you can't get into it.
People will be able to access the energy dissipator structure by walking up the access road. At the energy, the head wall, there is going to be almost like a 2.8 meter fall. So what we have is we have a hand railing there. On the side slopes, there will be large stones, so we have not provided any barrier there. Generally, the chamber will be kind of empty, but the real risk is when you have a heavy rain.
Right.
That chamber can get filled up with water very quickly, and then within maybe 15-20 minutes, half an hour, it will empty out. So I would say that area is going to be inaccessible, but if someone is bent upon getting in there, they can get in there.
Okay, I have more questions, but I'll go to council. Councillor Adair, then Councillor.
Well, it's not a question. I also grew up in that neighborhood, and we actually did crawl up that storm drain. We never made it all the way to the top, but
It was fun.
it was a lot of fun. But it was probably very, very unsafe, and I'm glad that it's been
Children today would not do
blocked
that.
off. No, I would certainly hope not. But that area, I'm glad that the whole thing is proceeding, and that will be done by the end of this month with the hydroseeding and stuff, because it has been a little while, and I think the neighbors have been more than patient, and I'm glad that it's proceeding along.
Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't imagine anybody's children trying to climb up through there. I know mine certainly wouldn't do that, or Councillor Adair's. To Mr. Sharma, though, the outlet of that pipe at the top, at the end of the access road at the very top,
There is no way anybody can get in. It's inside a chamber, there is a manhole cover.
Yeah.
So there is no way, nobody can get in there.
Thank you.
Those are the words we need to hear. Thank you.
Again, like I mean, to get in there, somebody will have to open the manhole cover, and then I hope the 25 feet fall will scare anybody.
Yeah. Councillor Burden.
So the way it has been built has completely changed what was a forested ravine. Is there a plan to replant trees to make it look a little more natural? Because right now it's an amazing gash, and I've had lots of comments about why we would be kind of, from an aesthetic and also from a naturalization point of view, construct something like that.
In the design drawings, we did not show any removal of trees on the north side because we were not really doing anything on the north side. On the south side, we had an access road because once energy dissipator structure is there, it may require maintenance from time to time. So we had to provide an access road. Now that access road, for the construction of access road, we had to come some trees. Now, because of some change at the location of this pipe outlet, the access road now will be shortened. To plant, before we can plant the trees, I just got the letter around 4:30 from Golder Associates, the geotechnical engineer, and they have, remember, I mean, we had the meeting at the site on Monday, and so I subsequently called them. It was long overdue because they were supposed to provide some direction about rehabilitating the area that the contractor fixed up. So they have provided a suggestion, recommendation to, they basically provided two recommendations. They're saying the slope, as it has been rehabilitated, it's safe on its own. It has a factor of safety fairly high, as it should be. But they have provided two suggestions. One is provide a erosion control mat over that area after providing some topsoil and hydroseed it. Now that may take some time to for the vegetation to grow there and stabilize it. Second suggestion they have made is, which probably is not going to be achievable, they have recommended that we construct a swale at the top and prevent any runoff water flowing down the hill. But looking at that site, the number of trees there, I don't think that's doable. In the past, the water has been flowing down, and I think as long as we can, this rehabilitated area that we are talking about, if we can prevent the water getting under this mat, I think we are going to be fine.
Councillor Burden?
So there's no plan other than a matting, because there were trees there that was forested. There's no plan to replace any of that vegetation. It's just going to be hydroseeded with a mat?
Right now, that's correct. That's the project is. There were some trees which were not in good shape, and there was a risk that if they could fall over the construction workers and all that. And plus, I mean, as I said, like we had planned to construct the access road, and if we had gone ahead with the access road, there probably would not be that much room to plant those trees, but that's not going to happen now.
But I was thinking more of where the whole slope shifted or slid. There's a big gravel area going right up the slope, and it's just going to be seeded. There's not going to be trees there?
That's the area I was talking about. They will provide like topsoil, then provide an erosion control blanket, and tie it down, pin it down, hydroseed it, which will take some time for the roots to grow. And we have to watch. I mean, they have asked for frequent monitoring after heavy rainfall or snow melt. And so I think we probably should maybe wait for some time before we plant any shrubs or any naturally occurring species in that area. I'm probably not suggesting what you would like to hear, but the contract does not include the planting of trees.
I was just, there was another major project just a little further south where there was an access road built, and there were trees planted and shrubs, and are all part of the rehabilitation of that. Do you know where I'm speaking of, just to the south? So I wonder why there was no, is it not being considered because you weren't expecting the slope to fail, so you didn't put that in, or?
Like the slope, I mean, let's talk about why the slope failed. The slope failed for two reasons. One, there is probably maybe about 2 feet or 3 feet thick layer of topsoil organic material which was sitting on the top of a very, very hard clay. And that layer of clay, after rains or snow melt, it provided a slip plane. And to compound the problem further, the contractor was excavating in that area, so he had a toe which was unsupported, and that triggered the failure of the slope. But for now, like once the dissipator structure is constructed, the area that you see right now, if you go out there, the pipe, there will be at least another 6 feet of soil above that. So you could see that. I mean, right now it may look like the hill is unstable, but once it is backfilled, it will look like much stable slope. And the geotechnical engineer who has just sent the letter today, they had seen the cross section that it will be built to. So that's why they are basing their decision based on that. They're making the call based on that. Actually, it will be, that particular area will be a little flatter than what it was before the project started.
Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes, I'd just like to thank you for this report, and I've had some people say to me they thought it was a little overkill, but I've had that well explained why we had to make all of those ridges of those large blocks, and you explained that very well tonight as well. So I think the fact that the sign went up when we said that it's going to be completed, and then all of us need to help everybody understand. It will take time, but I do think it will fill in quite nicely, just like the other slope did. So, and
I think by the end of this
stopped
month,
erosion.
the
Yes.
project would look much more acceptable
Yes.
than what it is right now.
Yes.
Right now, it does look like an eyesore.
We're going to hang on those words. That's good. Any further questions, discussion? Thanks very much for the update. We'll see you in a
Thank
couple of
you.
weeks. Cheers. Motion to receive the verbal update. Moved by Councillor McManaman. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have 2 sets of minutes, boards and committees for council's approval. Accessibility and financial advisory. It's council's direction. Councillor Purdon?
Move acceptance of the minutes as presented.
Okay. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have 1 set of minutes from our in-camera meeting for approval. No, we don't. We have other business. Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Your Worship. First question I have, which I didn't ask at the time, is the air conditioning working in City Hall? I'm sorry, it's oppressively warm, and it's not that warm outside.
We'll go directly to the Director of Operations.
Yes, certainly our air conditioning system, the HVAC system with this building does present challenges because it's not an automated system, so it doesn't automatically switch over depending upon what the demand might be. It has to be manually converted from heat to air conditioning. With the cool weather we've had, of course, of late, we did have the air conditioning on, and then of course it was quite cold. And so with the cool weather, we had to turn the heat back on. And now that the temperature is actually starting to rise again, we need to put the air conditioning back on. It was activated this afternoon, but it does take a bit of time for it to cycle the building and bring it back to that temperature. So it is on, it just takes time. And unfortunately, it wasn't turned on earlier than this afternoon.
It's just with all the lights in this room, it does create, I mean, they're all heating elements essentially.
Sure, yeah.
One of the great things about our new council chambers is these are all LED lights and they don't generate heat.
That's a good thing.
Okay, I guess hot air rises and that's why it's warm.
We're on the top floor.
Yeah, I won't go any further than that. One thing that concerned me when we looked at transportation, I'm going to be asking, we weren't given the choice of 3 routes with not a transit depot, but with an area where people could interchange buses. And I'm hoping when we come to the special meeting, we're going to look at all the options, because that option was not on the table, and that's why I bring that up.
It's a good point, Councillor Lemon, and certainly when we have the special council session to deal with only transit, everything is on the table for discussion, and I look forward to that.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to mention was there is a public meeting on the future of the Marine Rail Museum hosted by the Friends of the Marine Rail, the Royal Canadian Legion, on Tuesday, June 18th at 7 p.m. That's Branch 6 on 2nd Avenue West. I'm sure everybody knows where that is. And there are a lot of posters all over the city asking people to attend to give some input to see what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coulter.
Thank you, Your Worship. My item was received under 12B8. Thank you.
Great. Ms. Van Alphen, yours is looked after. Okay. Anyone else? Last minute? No? Okay. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We're back in a formal session. A resolution adopting proceedings in Committee of the Whole, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright, that the action taken in Committee of the Whole in considering public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business be hereby confirmed by this Council.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Notices of motion.
Your Worship,
Yes.
I file this notice of motion. I hereby give notice that I will move or cause to be moved a motion at the next regular council meeting to rescind that portion of motion R 130527-12 pertaining to council directing staff to issue a request for proposal for the leasing of the former CN Rail Station. This will permit the Friends of the Marine Rail Museum to come forth with a proposal to save the said museum.
Duly noted. That will be considered at the next council meeting.
If I might, Your Worship, point of order, won't it be too late at that point to consider it? Thank you.
The motion is on the floor, and it'll be considered at the next council meeting. It is important to note that the RFP was released on the date, so we'll deal with it in 2 weeks' time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. New business by resolution. Bylaws, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright, that bylaw numbers 2013-109 through to 2013-119 inclusive be hereby passed and enacted.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We are now adjourned.
Transit meeting at 6 next week. 6 o'clock.
6 bells. You made good time.